Let's get rolling. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're talking about MTR, Microsoft Teams Room, and its integration with QSC and the Q-SYS platform as a whole. We'll be talking about the different pieces of the system that create a certified system within Microsoft and what that looks like, and how that interacts with our software and our hardware. So a key component here is understanding the difference between Teams Desktop, referring to the application, and a Teams Room. So the desktop itself is something that a lot of us are used to. It's something that lives on our computer, right? It's our laptop essentially is something that we could take with us to host a meeting, and we're just using that desktop application that's built onto the computer that we take with us. Now, this might be something like a BYOD setup where we're bringing a computer into a conference room to host a meeting. The interface is what we see on our desktop on our computer based on that app that we're using. And then we have a Teams room where we might say have a dedicated machine to a room that's always available to drive that meeting, to be that host for that meeting, for that system that it's tied to. The idea of that is it's always ready. It's a kind of a simplified interface, so it might look a little differently from the desktop application and what you're used to looking at, but the idea is that it's a little bit more user-friendly. It's a little bit more intuitive for somebody to quickly walk in, hit join a meeting, or oh, this is the one I'm in, share content, whatever it is, and you kind of have a simplified user experience to make it easier on the people using the room. As you can see here, you get things like your one-touch join, some of your meeting control that you would have on your desktop application, but again, it's just a little bit more simplified. So some of the differences there being that a Teams desktop app-driven system is something that's going to be more geared towards driven by the person hosting the meeting, whereas if you have a room application, it's kind of like the way a lot of us used old hardware codecs, right, where you've got a box living in a room that is the driving source of that video conference system. This is essentially the same thing, but you get a few more pieces in that it can be tied into room components a little bit easier. You're less tied down to specific hardware, with the caveat being, in order for it to be certified, there are some steps that you have to go through for the certification process for the hardware for Microsoft to call that a Teams certified system. We have done quite a bit of that within our platform, which we'll dive into a little bit more here. So every Teams room has some requirements in order for it to meet that certification we talked about, and to meet a Teams room in general, you must have some components, right? So you need that dedicated room PC that's running an enterprise version of Windows, running that Teams room application on it. Typically, you're going to have a certified interface, something like a Logitech Tab. Lenovo's got the Smart Controller. Crestron Flex is another option that's out there. Those are all pieces that work together, right? You've got the compute device, and then you've got the controller that is the interface. So those are the core pieces of that system that are required to have that MTR system. They have the ability to ingest HDMI for content. You have some, again, different methods of doing this depending on the control interface that you've got. Like the Tap, for instance, I believe has that HDMI input on it, so you can drive your content straight into that interface for ingesting the HDMI from a PC. Some other applications might require some additional hardware. And then you've got the audio and video components that make this the full room. So something that drives our solution to pretty much the top choice for any kind of these applications is the way that we host everything through that single USB connection. So our platform as a whole allows you to plug into any of our USB bridging devices, regardless of which device that is you're using, whether it's an IO USB bridge, whether it's an NV32, any of our core processors, in addition to those, can be that host device for bridging. And being that we do all of our switching kind of behind the scenes, if you will, we do it all in software. the compute device that's plugged into our platform has that single connection point that never loses connection, regardless of if you're switching the microphones being used, the cameras, the output source. It doesn't matter, because it has that one single USB connection to our platform that is the certified platform. So this opens up a lot of opportunity for expanding those systems based on the use case of the room that they're going in, or the type of room that they're needed in, or if you have a need for a built-in system with BYOD, we have the ability to do that, to give you multiple places to connect, multiple ways to use the system as a whole, and the ability to expand that with more cameras, more microphones, more audio zones, without being confined to a certain limited number based on the hardware, because essentially we have the ability to scale that as large as we need to through our software. So as we talked about that first piece, right, that compute device that's required, you got to have that in order to drive these rooms. All right, that piece is tied to our core processor. So that core processor is what's driving that communication for a USB bridge, for our audio. If you're using our video, that's the driving source of that as well, in terms of switching and routing and controlling that video. And as we expand on this, we'll talk about those more in depth. But having that core processor obviously is the first step to your certified team system. And any of our core processors that we offer, I believe with the exception of the core 510, are team certified, but the peripherals that work with the 510 are team certified. So you can use a 510. I'll preface that you can use a 510 if you're using the right peripherals. It's just that the 510 doesn't have a USB bridging port on it, so you can't physically plug into it and call it a team certified device. But you can use a USB bridge. You could use a IO8 Flex for audio. You could use an MB32, anything like that has that bridging port and it's certified. All of this is built on that Ethernet platform. So extension, expansion of the devices that are available to your system is all done over the network. So you're limited within the realms of that network. So if you want to add more devices, it's another network drop. This allows, as I mentioned, it allows us to scale more. It allows us to scale without having really any limitations short of the network, which tends to make life easier these days. It's one of the ways I think we've gotten ahead of the curve, if you will, is looking, when this platform was created, was looking down the road going, well, network is where people are going. How do we build our platform around network to make it truly scalable in regards to that? And I think we've done a phenomenal job with it, and it's only getting better. So here you can see we've added in the controller that we mentioned. That's your other piece of that compute device that's required to drive that meeting. One of the nice things about using that compute device we'll get into a little deeper is whenever you start bringing in BYOD, we can still drive that meeting and the control of the room from that controller that's tied directly to that compute device without the need of any secondary touch panel or another way to control within the room. And we can all do that all programmatically in our software. So then we introduced the audio aspect here of the system. So we partnered with Sennheiser for the microphone portion of the audio. Prior to us releasing our own microphone, we had the Teams or the Team Connect 2 microphone certified to work within our platform. Being that it is certified, we can maintain that team certification using that. In addition to that, we have all of our SPA series of amplifiers, our CXQ series of amplifiers, and all of our acoustic design series of speakers are all within that realm of certification. So there shouldn't be any uncertainty of which ones you can use and maintain that certification. Dan, did you have a comment to make? I saw you turn your mute off and then back on. I didn't know if you had.
I just thought people maybe were missing my face there. So no, I was just going to jump in. You know, this is a place where we always get a lot of questions from folks, and maybe we can cut a few questions off at the pass. You know, people, do you have to use a Sennheiser TCC2? The thing to understand there is that we have a single USB connection that says this is a Q-SYS processor. It presents that product ID and a vendor ID. And then it, you know, and that's really all the processor knows. And so what we've certified is the path with starting with a Sennheiser mic, going through our amplifiers, going through our speakers, that's the audio path. So if the room was to be supported by Microsoft and they determine that there's some variable in there that has been changed, then they technically may push the support of that back onto the integrator. So there. So. Yeah, wait, while we have it, we have a question from Alan. So you want to handle that one?
Sure. Yeah. The question is there an in-wall installation option for speakers? Not specifically. We have the ceiling flush mount speaker, the ceiling recess speaker. We have the surface mount speaker, and then we have pendant speakers. I suppose you could put it in ceiling in the wall, but I'll leave that up to you. I probably wouldn't do that myself personally, but no, we don't make any in-wall speakers specifically for that.
Many moons ago in my home theater days, I had a boss that liked to put in-wall speakers in the ceiling. So he liked the squares and the rectangles in the ceiling. Whatever. Anyways, we digress. Okay. Is there a rectangle grill for the ceiling speaker? There is no rectangle grill for the ceiling the AD series ceiling speakers. No, some of our older higher performance for like ballrooms and all that, like come with huge back cans, all of that. I mean, would be way more than for a conference room. Those do have a square grill option, but that's, you know, that wouldn't fit in a wall. It's because they're large back cans. So
they barely fit in the ceiling.
But we do have some column line arrays in that series. There'll also be our network loudspeaker, but obviously if you're at a university, Alan, you know, a couple of PoE network loudspeakers at the front of an auditorium isn't going to work. But I would say check with one of your regional application engineers and we can probably find the right speaker solution for you. So I'll stop interrupting you there, Coy. Sorry.
You're good. Thanks for the help there. We had another question just pop up while we're chatting. If there is a third-party PTZ camera in the system, can the NV32 be used to convert to a USB camera? It cannot. So our cameras that we have are strictly network cameras. We can take that feed and spit it out of an NV32, but we cannot take a camera into the NV32 and make it a USB camera feed. That question comes up a lot. But no, we do not have the ability to do that. The ways I've seen folks work around that is a capture card. I'm sure you guys are familiar with those. That's just, you know, depending on the situation in the system, the capture card can be what you need. Sometimes that's not an option if you're talking about BYOD or something like that. But no, we are not able to do that. All right. So as I mentioned, the speakers here, Dan mentioned some of those other lines. We've got a slew of them, and there's actually a slide here we'll show at the end that has a list of everything that is currently team certified. There's also a web page I'll share as we get a little bit deeper in that has a lot of this information that is great for just a resource to reference if you have questions about the products we have and how they work with teams. We do have some website pages I'll share here a little bit as we get through this. This slide deck's not too long, so we'll get through this pretty quickly, and then we can show some of those. To Dan's point, the PoE speakers are to come. Those aren't quite yet certified, but those will all be certified. So if you use any of our PoE speakers, which a lot of folks are using those now because they work really nicely with our Core Nano, being that there's no analog I/O on the Core Nano. They can use our PoE speakers in a conference room, drop a couple of those in, and they have a fully vetted system. We do not support NDI for camera outputs. I see a question there about that. We do have an HD SDI output on our cameras that can be turned on, and you can take that into a device. Same with the HDMI output on the camera, but then you would have to extend it or convert it to whatever format you need it in. So a nice part of this platform to round out the video pieces is as we show these systems, and I'll probably bring this up again, you're kind of limitless with what you can add. I mean, obviously there is a physical hardware limit that can be supported in the software, and the cores have limits based on the number of peripherals they can communicate with in a running system. So there are limitations. We use the term unlimited expandability, or we say it's ultimately scalable to whatever you want, because nobody's ever really, I don't think anybody's ever thrown a 250, whatever the limit is, I think it's 250 cameras into a system to really see what that looks like. Most applications don't require that. You know, we see 6, 8, 10, and that works all day long. But the thing to remember is, no matter how many cameras you have in that room, no matter how many USB endpoints and bridges you have for different connections to different computers, that computer, as it's connected to that single USB, sees it all as one connection. It's one audio source, it's one video, or it sees the camera as one video, and then we switch it within our software, and the computer doesn't know the difference. And that's really what makes it such a seamless integration with our platform, is you can really build these systems how customers expect them to function without the need of different widgets to make things switch and route and convert and reformat the way that I think traditionally everybody's kind of done it. So there is a limitation I'll mention on the Core 110. When we moved to, I think it was version 9, it may have even been another version after that, 9.2, 9.3, something like that. The USB function on the back of the Core 110 only had some limitations, where if you are using a 2.0 device or plugging in with a 2.0 cable, you get a lower image quality from that camera. So we recommend using 3.0. That is only a limitation of the Core 110. That is not of any of the other USB bridging ports that we have. And Dan, you may not know this. I'm gonna ask you anyways, and maybe you do, maybe don't. Maybe Steve does. Is the version 2 Core 110, is that under that same limitation? We want to see 3.0, or do you know?
So that motherboard and that chip are still the same. It was just the accessories to that board, the OLED and the GPIO blocks, that there was chip shortages on. So it's still, until there's a new Core 110, that port will just be that way. So, and also don't confuse that. Sorry, I was answering some questions, so you may have already said this. The IO USB bridge has a 2.0 port, but you still get full motion video. So just like to reiterate that. Seems like no matter how much we say it, people ask that. So
yeah, and I want to say it took me a few months to get it. Even working with the product regularly, it still took me like thinking, no, it's just the Core 110. It's not a software limitation. It's the hardware of the Core 110. That's the limitation. So we try to make that noted. If you're using that as a bridging port, try and keep it 3.0 if at all possible.
Here's a great question, but it really wasn't a question. It was share. I love it. Gary Cummings here says, share the USB future functionality of the G3, 7, and 10 panels. So yeah, I mean, one of the things on the feature that we will be adding is a licensed feature that you'll be able to, on the new 3 series touch panels, they have a USB-C port on the back, so you'll be able to have a license in your design to say, I'm going to activate 3 of these USB-C ports as bridging ports. So then you'll just put a touch panel right on the table there, so and be able to go with that. So Steve, you can answer. Oh, Steve clicked it as answering live. So cool. All right, Coy, back to it. A lot of great questions. Please keep them coming, folks. This is what we have to do there.
And thanks for that. Thanks for that reminder with the USB-C. Some of those new ones slip past us because we're focused on delivering the message. It's like, oh yeah, by the way, this is added. We constantly see that, oh, we need to add an extra bullet in our notes for talking about things like that. So thank you. Yeah, the idea of that is, if you're using, say you're using a virtual core, if y'all are familiar, we've recently launched the vCore option, where if you're just doing control, you don't need any of the audio. You can spin up a virtual machine and be running pretty quickly. But you could do some bridging with that if you have the right components working in relation with that. But you could use that touch panel for control. Maybe you need to do some network audio bridging, something like that. Talk to a camera. You have that USB-C port on the back of our new Gen 3 touch panels that will be activated soon with a license, as Dan mentioned. And just to note those limitations, as I mentioned, the camera's 250, and then I believe the bridging devices that are supported within a file is 50. And then you're also, again, limited by the number of peripherals that a core can support. So there's caveats to all those numbers, but work with us, work with your apps engineer, your local sales folks as you're designing. If you are getting to where you're like, oh man, I'm using a lot of stuff, which core should I use? That we can help you through that as you're designing. Let's move here. So while we're talking about design, let's look at some designs. We've got some line drawings here of maybe a typical boardroom, and we'll kind of walk through what that looks like and how that interacts with a Teams meeting room compute PC. So as you can see, we've got a system here. It looks like there's a credenza rack potentially, and then the conference room. So the first thing we have shown here is the audio. Obviously, we've got our core processor that's handling our control and our audio output to that SPA series amplifier. We're feeding a couple of zones of audio in the room. And we're also ingesting audio from the microphone, the TCC2 microphone in the room, to pick up everybody in the room. We've got one of our PTZ cameras. A quick note on the cameras, the PTZ is our old model. Our new series is the NC series network camera. Really creative with the nomenclature there. We've replaced the PTZ with the NC series camera. The NC series, I don't believe is certified as of yet, but that's in the process, as is our PoE speakers that we recently released. So those should be completely certified soon. But you can use the PTZ camera for now if your customer requires that full certification, or just know if you go with the new ones, it will be certified soon, potentially before you even install it. So we're showing a single camera here in this room. Again, that could be any number of cameras. You could have a presenter camera and an audience camera, all based on how the room's set up. And then we show our compute device here tied to the Teams room controller. As we can see, we've got the Teams room compute is tied into the core. That's via USB. And then we've got a USB connection to the room controller tied back to that compute device. And then for video here, what we've got in the room is one of our NV32s set up as an encoder. You can see we're actually using all three inputs. This is kind of a confusing drawing here because of the layout, but as you can see, we've got the room PC. This is going to be a single output from this PC into the encoder. The encoder has 3 inputs on it and then 2 laptop inputs on it. And then we've got this fourth line here that goes to that room controller is a video output. So we can ingest a separate signal if we want to send content from a different computer, but while also using that in-room compute. That's kind of the idea of this. And then we also have a decoder here in the rack to ingest video from this PC. I think that should say encode. Oh no, that's feeding the display over here. So that's just the decoder in the system, so that the video sources at the display can feed this decoder and then go out to the display in the room, and it also receives video from the room compute PC that's in the credenza rack there. And here we see that we're utilizing the USB bridging port on this encoder at the tabletop coming from one of the laptops. So that introduces a BYOD function within the room. So if somebody says, hey, I know you've got one in there, but I want to use my laptop, they're able to do that easily by using that bridging port. And because of how we switch all this in software, they have the same access as the team room compute has access to the microphones, the speakers, the camera, everything in that room. So it's a really easy design. It's a really intuitive for the end user. It makes it simple for programming and switching, and the computers don't know the difference when we're switching between camera 1, camera 2, microphone, computer. Even we can switch those in software. So we're switching which computers have access to them. We can give access to those devices to simultaneously to those computers as well. I don't know why you would do that necessarily, but you could. You could absolutely do that. This is a view of a Teams skinned interface. So this would actually be driven by our processor running on the Logitech tap in this situation. This requires loading a small .msi file to that Teams room compute. But what that allows us to do is run a touch panel driven by our UCI engine, our processor, to the UCI touchscreen of choice for whatever Teams room compute you're using. This gives us the ability to drive that second page user experience. When somebody comes in and plugs in their laptop and wants to drive from their laptop, we can give them a completely different interface that looks more like a traditional room control and isn't tied down to looking like the Teams room system. And so what that allows you to have is when the customer comes in, wants to use the room just as a quick Teams call, it looks like a Teams room control on the user interface. And then when they come pop in their BYOD device and want to drive it separately, it can be skinned completely differently. It could be whatever you want it to look like. It can look identical. It doesn't have to change, but we have the ability to do that based on the room design being the way that it is. Here's kind of that full view of all those lines connected together, so you can kind of get an idea of what that looks like as a whole. And again, this is one simple design. There are so many, and what I'll do after we go through these next couple, we have a web page I'll show you that has designs on it. It has designer files already built as templates that you could use and modify and tweak. If you want a starting point within the software, we've got that as well. So next we'll kind of talk about a large multi-purpose room where somebody might want that same functionality. So this one's a little different. We're using some different hardware here. You can see for the audio portion, we're keeping it all networked. So we don't actually even have any amplifiers in this system. We're using our PoE ceiling speaker here is shown NL series. That again, that could be the pendant, that could be the ceiling recessed. It doesn't matter which one you're using. Then we've got our TCC2 from Sennheiser that's driving the incoming audio. And at some point, we'll probably update this, maybe not a divisible room, but in a boardroom where we're using our NMT1 microphone in here, which will also be Teams certified once it's released. So for the time being, we'll use this Sennheiser. But we can see we're just driving that off of the network. So we've got a mic in each room and some speakers in each room. Then again, for cameras, we've got one per room. And again, that could be a couple per room. That could, like I mentioned before, that could be presenter, audience camera, that could be dual shot camera. You could be using our automatic camera preset recall plugin that we have for tracking it within the room based on who's speaking. You could use multiple cameras for that. It doesn't matter because all that compute device sees is that one connection to the core, and that core being its handshake for that video bridge. For that camera functionality. Here again, we've got our Teams controller and our compute device. This time it's living in the room somewhere. Maybe this looks like it's an Electern if I'm seeing through my grayed out text here. That's driving a decoder in that rack. And then if we bump ahead here, we can see some more video added. So we've got some encoders added here so we can ingest video. This compute device, we're feeding two outputs into the encoder and then one single from a laptop guest PC, but that gives us the ability to go split screen and we can output content on one screen, camera on the other, and flip-flop those based on ingesting those two different feeds in. And same thing in this room, we're just not showing those lines. And then in the rack here, we've added some more equipment. This shows a wireless presentation device, which could be shared between the rooms individually. It doesn't really matter how that's used, but we're just showing some more function. Obviously, we've got a room PC driving this encoder as well. And then we see we still have that BYOD function because we have those extra, we have this second NV32 in the rack. We have that second USB bridging port. So that room compute, we'll jump back here. This room compute is using this bridging port on the decoder, and then the BYOD device is using the bridging port on this encoder. So it's the same box, and I'll talk about that briefly because I think it might be something that people overlook. Even though you might use an NV32 as an encoder or a decoder in a system, you can still use that bridging port to on-ramp, off-ramp a bridging device, which really becomes cool if you think about how people might use a decoder in a room. Maybe they don't need the function today, but down the road they want to add it. They have a decoder behind the display. They need USB bridging. Well, they have a port on that decoder that they can use. It doesn't have to be an encoder to use that. which is a pretty cool feature within the software. The video is a little more limited because you can't stream the inputs on a decoder out because it's a decoder, not an encoder, but the audio still will function in that way along with the video bridging. Again, we can skin this Logitech tap in this design and make it look like Teams for when they're using the in-room PC, and then we can also drive that second page experience as needed. But you can see kind of what is shown here in a divisible type room where you've got the ability to select the different streams. Again, the PC knows no different. It's all done in our software. There's kind of a blown out view, shows everything. And I forgot to mention, we do have some guest inputs here in the room as well. I'm not sure what those are serving there as, but they're just an additional guest input. Here's a Huddle room application where we're showing our Core Nano processor driving this room. We're showing our NL-SB42, which is our network loudspeaker soundbar. And this one shows our NMT1 microphone, which I love. And we can see it showing our NC110, which is our wide view camera. Great for Huddle rooms, great for those wide shot rooms where the PTZ and the NC series just don't give you the wide enough field of view. It's all network powered, just like our other ones there. And then we show our Teams room compute with controller driven the same way, right? We're just going HDMI out into the display here, but we're going USB from the controller into the compute and then USB from the compute into the Nano. And then this is interesting. We're showing this laptop going into the Nano as well. And some of y'all may or may not know this. If you haven't seen, I'll show this whole design so you can see all the connections there. Our Core Nano actually has two USB ports on it. It's got a USB-C and it's got a USB-B. Those two can be used to drive separate USB bridging devices with the caveat that they are not controllable. However, the USB-B takes a priority over the USB-C. So the way that works is in this system, this Teams room compute would need to get tied to the USB-C port on the Nano, and then the guest laptop would be tied to the USB-B, so that if a guest comes in and plugs in, it will automatically take over that USB function from the Teams room compute. There's no way to change that priority. B is always going to have priority over C, and you just got to know that when you wire it and when you design it, but you have the ability to basically have a BYOD with that single core processor, which is a pretty cool feature. It doesn't work in every application, but for a system like this, we've designed many rooms just like this that work in this way. I've done more complex systems and used that automatic switching for the sake of it was easy and we had it available to us. So it's a very useful tool to have on hand and be able to design with. Right. So we have some of these sample designs I mentioned. I'm going to back out of this presentation just for a second, and I'm actually going to jump over to our web page and make sure that y'all can see my screen.
While you're doing that, I'm going to answer a couple. While you're doing that, I'm going to answer a couple of questions like on this. So we've got one here from Zed Zakaria. How do you think you can drive the BYOM function? Is there any control to be added so that it's not confusing? We actually, inside Q-SYS Designer, we do have some abilities to force a second page experience. We can also change the user interface that's on that tab. So there might be one when you're in a Teams room and you need second page control, you plug in, and you flip over to the second page, you would have it themed and look like Teams. But then maybe when you plug in a BYOM, bring your own machine or meeting, you could also trigger that second page experience to be a different look and feel so people know that they're in kind of a Teams room example. So it's actually part of the demo systems and kits that all of our apps engineers and area managers are carrying around. So I almost feel like that's a loaded question, like, hey, like, or like a purposely one in there. But yeah, it actually, we do that. We demonstrate that purposely because that is, people look at that and want to do that.
And so the way we do that is within the software.
One thing I think we need to clarify, because it doesn't 100% show it in the slides, is we always show everything with the single USB connection going between the MTR compute and the core. And what that's doing is that's actually bringing the bridging in. So that's how you're getting your camera and your microphone feed back and forth. It also requires an MTR component inside the design and a network connection. So the core and the MTR compute need to be on the same network. Maybe not even on LAN A with all your peripherals. If your MTR is on your corporate compute or on your corporate network, you can use the LAN B to make that connection so that that's the only thing that is sitting on the corporate side of the network. But as far as driving that second page and serving up the UCI that becomes that second page, that actually happens over the network. So it doesn't always, it gets shown sort of in some of the slides, but I think that's a pretty big point that needs to be made, is that we're not doing that through the USB. That's happening over the network. So, and likewise, you would need
that. It's basically we're loading the UCI viewer onto the team's compute device, and that's being served up by the core. So to further that point, without that network connection, you're not going to have that UCI viewer essentially, which is what gets loaded and what you're seeing on that tap or on the controller that's tied to the compute device.
And just another point of clarification, earlier when you were talking about how we load that MTR UCI viewer on there, it's not an MSI anymore. It's actually an EXE now, because some corporate regulations were having issues with us running MSIs on there. So it's now just a basic, generally wrapped EXE file. They changed that a version or
things that change while you're building a training center.
Yeah, we changed that a couple of versions ago to make things easier on people.
Thanks, Steve. I appreciate you bringing us into the current there. So perfect.
We've got a couple more questions we can just thumb through here.
I'm answering Jerry's with a typed message, but if you guys want to address the other ones, that'd be great.
So I'm going to answer. Dan asked, in a room like this, a divisible room, can you turn the bridging USB signal based on combined or not combined? Absolutely. We can monitor the setup of the room, the functionality required, and we can either automate what goes where. You can give full control of that switching to the end user if they need it. It's really up to you. It's completely customizable. And it's really just based on what is needed in the system. But yes, you have the ability to change those routes. As I mentioned, if you have two computers plugged in, both of those computers can get the camera feeds if you want them to. Again, I don't know why you would do that, but there might be an application where somebody needs to, and you have the ability to do that. And that's another one of the beautiful things about us doing everything in software, is we have a lot more flexibility in that.
Do you want me to answer the vCore question?
Yeah, go for it. I was gonna push those through, but go for it.
So people were asking about vCore. Our PC specs what determines how many rooms can be controlled from a vCore? Not really. So vCore uses the same amount of RAM and the same amount of resources regardless of what all you're doing. Right now, the limitation on vCore has to do with the number of peripherals, the number of scripts that you can run, things like that. So it's not really a spec issue. I mean, if you can load it, you can load it and it'll run. At this point, it just has to do with peripheral limits and script limits and things like that.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. Dan, my question was regarding dual visible room. Okay, we answered that one. I'll just thumb through these real quick.
Any chance a nuke can run vCore and Teams at the same time? Boy, wouldn't we love for that to be the case. From what I understand, we have begun very early conversations with Microsoft regarding them letting us run instances of vCore on an MTR compute. But if that comes about, it will likely be a while, because getting anything through Microsoft blessing takes forever.
And we have one here from Brad. It says, now that 9.5 has page 2 show and hide hooks, will the UCI be updated to full screen? The UCI, so the way it gets rendered into The Teams is similar to where we're loading the UCI viewer on a PC. So it will maintain the aspect ratio and bar it out. If you build the UCI for the dimensions of the tap or whatever you're using as the compute device, it will match that. But if there's any additional barring around it, that's going to be a Microsoft Teams thing in the way they're handling it on the backside. The first way to eliminate most of that blanking would be to build your UCI in the correct aspect ratio, and it'll maintain that. And we have that ability in Q-SYS. You can build custom aspect ratios for your UCIs too.
And I think MTR is now an option in there as a.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah. So yeah, and like Dan said, if it does have the bars, that's a limitation of what the compute device is allowing. So one thing I wanted to mention earlier,
we have a Logitech Tap MTR as a choice in there.
Okay,
so,
that's
yeah,
what thanks
deal.
for checking that. So as I mentioned, this page I found just getting prepared to discuss this with everyone today. I went looking on our website to see if we had any updated devices that our team certified, and found this awesome page that I just wanted to share. QSYS.com/alliance-partner/Microsoft-Teams. I think you can find it if you go up to your solutions and move into the right location. I think I found it under system types. I went to, I think, collaboration here, and then scrolled down and clicked Microsoft right here, and stumbled on this page, which is pretty cool because it has a lot of the stuff we covered today. I think somebody had a question about, will you get a copy of this presentation? We can send out a PDF of this. I'm not sure if that gets included with this recording, but if not, we can certainly get you the PDF of the presentation, the slides. But a lot of that is on this webpage, which is why I wanted to show this. It talks about a lot of the stuff we've run through today. There's some really cool stuff in here. Some of these designs we talked about. Look at that. That looks kind of familiar to something we maybe talked about earlier. There's all these different designs and layouts built shown here on this web page. But if we keep scrolling down, there's even more. Let's go. It talks about more features, things that you can do. But if we keep going now, we got some more resources down here. So there's a couple things I wanted to show. Here's a room configuration type. This will give you a layout for some basic room types that you might be working with or need to design around. This could get you a jump start on a design. There's some deployment guides here that could be useful to review through. We've got designer help files here, or pre-made designer files to get you started if you need kind of a running start with creating a file to run one of these rooms. We've got these here. We host these deep dives. We ask that you join us. We go through a lot of this stuff regularly. So if you have questions, we might cover it. You've got some other pieces here, the Teams room control component, which would be necessary to have that Teams UCI on that tap. And then we've got this application guide here that you can download. So lots of resources here on the webpage that are hugely beneficial. If this is the realm you're living in, is the Teams realm, this is it. This is the place to be. There's a lot of data here. Obviously, we're available to help if you guys reach out to us or your application engineers. We'd love to help you if you have questions. And I did want to share that. The other thing I wanted to share, if you're unsure where to go with for our webinars, it's under, I believe, resources here. Is it resources? Yeah, resources, and then webinars up here at the top on our Q-SYS page, and then it brings you to our webinars so you can sign up or see what's coming. If you don't get the emails that we blast out every month, this is a place, once you sign up, you will start getting those emails. And maybe this one was forwarded to you or you didn't get it directly. This is how you can sign up to get those. And that kind of brings us in, Steve. Did you have something? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, like Dan was saying earlier, we've been in the process of building new demo kits for all of the area managers and the application engineers, and that is, if it doesn't already, that includes MTR demo kits. So like, I know in our region we just got ours and we're in the process of setting it up and getting it ready, but all of the area managers should have demo kits at this point, and at the very least within the next, week or two, should be able to schedule a time if you want us to bring in an MTR and show you exactly how everything works. I mean, we can even schedule time with one of the application engineers to come in and show you what it looks like in the software. I'm actually going to do that tomorrow, where we're going out to do an MTR demo. So yeah, I mean, if you guys have questions about it, we can certainly do that. And that might be an idea for us to either expand this webinar or come up with another one where we actually go through and show, loading the viewer onto an MTR compute and setting up 2PE and going through and pushing a file to it and all that stuff.
A full setup.
That might be something that we kick around. Gary says, does the MSI EXE work on other manufacturers' MTR? Yeah. Again, as long as it is a Windows-based MTR. We do not have the ability to serve this up on any of the Android-based MTRs. So as long as it is one of the Windows-based MTRs, we can serve up the second page on it.
We've been told that our user interfaces look great on Crestron's touch panels.
Yep, on a Flex. So about vCore and integrating with MTR. Okay, so the problem with doing vCore with an MTR is that right now vCore is control only. So there is no audio engine and there is no video engine. So while you would conceptually be able to serve up the second page experience, you would not get any of the camera bridging or the mic bridging coming from it. So Nano would be the preferred interface for doing an MTR.
Definitely. Nano, NV32 as a core, any combination of those together are going to be your best bet for sure, especially in terms of availability.
I know everybody's piling on now.
As if you could get them, yes. Whoever has those and is selling them out of the back of their truck is making a killing.
Gary, thanks for the compliment. We appreciate that. So we like to keep this a pretty open, easy forum, and that hopefully that's the way it is for everyone, so sometimes it's loose and not as structured, but the idea is that you guys tune in, you ask questions, and then as long as they're relevant, we're happy to help out. So
I just threw this page up so y'all could reference it. A quick glance at all the different options we have for team certified products. Largest one out there for sure, and it's growing because we see the value in it, we see the importance in it, and what Microsoft is striving to do and what we want to do with our platform as well.
Hey, Coy, are you still in the slide deck?
I am.
Okay, can you back up to the in mine it's 24, because we have a question about having the Teams interface switch cameras, and we actually have a slide that shows it. There you go. Yes, on the second page you can put camera controls. So you can even do it by bridge, which is what we're showing up here. We have one bridge represented by the Teams camera select, room A, room B. Then we also have another bridge that's dedicated for your BYOD, and then we have another bridge that's dedicated for your room PC. So yes, you can run those bridges separately. Every bridge comes with its own camera source selector, and you can run all that out of the second page.
So Zed just followed up with, I meant Teams interface first page to switch USB. And it would have to be a second page experience thing for the switching of the cameras there. Because, and that's one of the things that makes our system unique, and I know Coy talked about this earlier, is that we're maintaining a USB connection and we're just switching streams to that connection. So that's one of the unique features of our system is that, you know, if you were trying to switch USB cameras, you're going to have to sync and resync call, you know, and drop the call, or you're going to put an HDMI switcher in there, something like that. But unfortunately, that first page is hands off to everybody, third party. You have to put your any controls outside of that on the other page. So. Did anybody finish Jonathan's question about our PC specs to determine?
I went over that. It's
okay.
It's just about peripheral limits and script limits at this point.
All right.
Yeah, you still want to use a piece of hardware, core hardware, if you need the USB bridging. And like Steve said, the Nano is probably your best bet. NV32 if you need the video sources as well, or you know, combination of those.
Like you can go back to the portfolio slide if you want to.
I'll pull that back down. This is prettier where it's scrolling through on the web page here. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and the slide that Coy had up earlier, that was just everything that has gone all the way through certification. We also have a bunch of the newer products that have passed the first round, and now we are into the second round of getting those added into the certification list. So I believe that's the NC cameras, the NL speakers, things like that.
SPA-Q.
That was the other one. I knew there was something.
SPA-Q. I'm sorry, SPA-Q.
I know. That thing's going to be SPA-Q forever.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Can the Q-SYS mic do speaker tracking like the TCC2? Sort of. So the NMT1 actually comes into Designer as 4 different mic nodes. So you could do a version of that with the NMT1.
But at this point, it's not providing the positional data that the TCC2 does.
No. It would be nowhere near as accurate or as clean.
It'd be much more manual. Yeah. I'm going to jump to the next question here. Brent said, just so I'm clear, the Nano has 2 USB ports that can be used for USB bridging. They auto switch. The B will always have priority regardless of the platform. That is correct. There's no way to do it in the hardware. It's automatic. It's the way I think this motherboard is laid out. Ultimately,
yeah. So that's a motherboard restriction there, that they are connected to a common bus on the board, so they only show up as one device to us. So that's.
But it is possible, and I just wanted to pull up the back of it so you could see it. You can see those 2 different ports there. Too bad that Microsoft hasn't implemented a way to leverage that camera switching can be done via first page. Yep. Yeah. Maybe. It's weird how some of the use cases drive backwards, how they change the platform to fit the need. I know I've seen that over the years with the different folks coming out. So yeah.
I mean, Windows can kind of sort of do it. So, I mean, like,
well, I feel like a lot of times they build these platforms, and Teams might be an exception because it started out as Skype, and then you know, evolved from there. But a lot of these platforms, they come out without. I think of Life Size for a long time was never really a box ever thought to be integrated into a system, but people wanted them that way. But the hardware wasn't really built for that. But people wanted to use it that
like
way.
3.5s for audio and stuff like that and stuff.
Yeah.
And the other thing too is what people, you know, and this goes back to one of the first slides there. The idea is ease of use, right? So you walk into a room, and I don't think they envisioned it growing to cameras with multiple rooms with multiple cameras and all that in its inception. So, I mean, who knows? It's all speculation. You know, Microsoft does what they want to do, but that would be kind of my feel. Is it like for easy use, they want those start meeting and, you know, kind of go from there buttons. So.
Yeah, we should probably iterate the fact that that USB-C port is just an audio video bridge. That is not it is not a Thunderbolt port, so it is not bringing the HDMI in as some USB-C products are. I know that we are working on some USB-C products for down the road that would be full functioning, but as far as the C port on the back of that Nano, that is just for audio and video bridging over the USB. That's not doing the HDMI or any sort of video feed coming from it. I guess I should say audio and camera bridging. Yeah. Let me rephrase that. I'm sure by saying audio and video bridging, I'm confusing people. So simply audio and camera bridging, not video bridging. I'll get this down.
And to offer up an idea, I'm not saying this will work. I absolutely say test this, but if you wanted that single cable for an end user, you could potentially look at using some sort of a PC dock, and then take the outputs of that, one being USB to the core, the other being your HDMI to whatever extender you're using, or NV32, whatever it is. And then you could offer up that single, but I would test that. I'm not saying that would absolutely work, but it's an idea. I've tossed that idea around for designs for that. Let me have one cable connection to my PC at the table. That's an avenue you could look at, and again, test it, make sure it works. Even if one dock works, the next one may not. So it's something worth looking at. Work with your AET if you want to test that out with some hardware live if you don't have it.
I gotta jump to another meeting, guys, but appreciate everyone joining on this. And if you guys still have a few more minutes to help folks out, that'd be great. But remember, if the design is a Q-SYS design, it should be a Q-SYS design. So
hey-o.
Had to have something catchy, and I'm out. That's why I only do one show a week. So see you guys.
Would USB detect still work with a dock? Yeah, it should.
Good. Yeah.
I mean, I use a dock on my laptop for doing stuff into my demo kit, and it knows when I plug the C of my dock into my laptop. So mainly because most of those docks are powered off that USB-C as well. So I think that's actually the critical differentiator. If you're talking about a dock that has some sort of external power, then it will probably leave the voltage connection going to the core. And same thing with like the 5-volt down the HDMI. But if you're just talking about I'll call it a passive dock, where it's basically just getting powered off that Thunderbolt port as well, then for sure those will, because as soon as you disconnect it from the laptop, it's going to kill all that voltage going back to the core. And that's what the core is using to see if anything's even there.
And honestly, that could be something, again, if you are in that situation programmatically, you can monitor if you're using multiple USB bridges, one of them's a dock and the dock is always connected. I mean, you can monitor those things and then build logic that drives which one's which, or it could be select which one you're using, that sort of thing. So I wouldn't call it a shortcoming. I would just say it's just, you might have to rethink how you lay out your program file, but it wouldn't have an issue there. Shelby needs some hats.
I don't even have a hat.
I don't either. It's weird.
I know, right? I have a beanie because
See,
it gets so cold down here.
You might have needed it this morning for 15 minutes.
Yeah, or not.
Regarding NV32 output to the HDMI on the tab, any sync issues where the tab always thinks the HDMI is active, you can control that within the NV32. So you can disable that sync, that sync detect. You can turn it on and off. So you actually have full control of that. So it shouldn't be an issue. If you need to resync it, you have the ability to force that if you want. So shouldn't be any issues there.
Hey, Coy, this is so much fun. We should do this next week.
We should do it next week.
I know.
I like that idea. What are we talking about next week?
I don't know, but you and I'll be in the same room next week.
Are we doing one next week?
I don't know. We're teaching next week. For sure.
I know now
we're teaching something.
Yeah, we're teaching something. It may not be via webinar though. I'm jumping back here to see if we've got one.
Yeah, I think we are. Everybody can witness firsthand exactly how prepared we are.
We'll figure out who's teaching it an hour before as well.
Maybe.
If everybody knows how well organized we are. It looks like authoring Lua modules is what we're going to be talking about next week.
Oh, so that's Kevin anyway. So the other three of us will all be in a room together.
Yeah, we will be. We'll be teaching. Is there a schedule of events out there for these? Check that webinars page if you can still see my screen. I'm on Q-SYS.com under resources and then webinars, and you can see what's upcoming. You can see here that we've got the
look at that. We could have just scrolled down.
I could have opened the right tab and I would have seen it. I'm looking at our Zoom meetings over here on the screen. So yeah, that's what we've got coming up for next week. They'll once this week ends, you'll see the next one added on there, which I believe is another Teams room design coming up in November. And we'll probably add some others in there, especially as we get closer to the holidays. We'll probably try and fit a few more of these in because we'll be traveling less, so we'll be around to host these a little bit more frequently.
Coy and I don't get to see each other on a bi-weekly basis.
Yeah. I feel like we should see each other more since we're both in Texas, but that doesn't happen that often. I see Dan every week. He comes to see me every week now. If we don't have any more questions, I'm gonna call it for the day. We appreciate everybody joining. We're slowly losing participants, so we'll call it here. And please reach out to us if you have any questions. firstname.lastname@qsc.com. Reach out to your sales folks, your application engineers. If you need some direction, we can help you there. Look forward to seeing everybody soon.
Bye, everybody.
Take care.